Winter light moves slowly across Oslo. It arrives pale and thin, settling over rooftops and frozen streets. The air is cool, almost still, carrying the faint sound of traffic from distant avenues along the harbor. Ice forms in soft, broken patterns. Ships rest quietly at anchor, their outlines muted by the morning haze. From the hills above the city, the view feels wide and subdued. Low clouds brush the skyline. The wind moves gently through bare trees, bending branches without sound. It is a landscape that holds memory without insisting on it, a place that has watched decades unfold, quietly and without hurry. It is within this setting that the life of Arne Treholt eventually came to its final rest, a man whose name has long been tied to one of Norway's most debated espionage cases, a case that began in the mid-1980s and continued to echo through the years, long after the moment of its judgment. He died in 2023, far from the political intensity that once surrounded him. What remains now is a mixture of known facts, unanswered questions, and the quiet distance of time. Arne Treholt was a civil servant and diplomat, a man who once moved easily within the circles of international relations. He held positions that carried responsibility and trust. He traveled often, attending meetings, conferences, and negotiations. Colleagues described him as articulate, confident, a person who understood the language of diplomacy and the subtleties of political conversation. His presence in the public sphere was neither loud nor hidden, simply part of the machinery of government work. In the early 1980s, he was seen regularly in ministry buildings, walking through narrow hallways with papers tucked under his arm, speaking quietly with those he worked beside. There was little to suggest what would soon unfold. No public signals, no shift in tone or behavior that most people noticed at the time. But beneath the surface of ordinary movement, the Norwegian Police Security Service had begun observing him. Their interest grew slowly, over months, as patterns emerged that did not fit the expected routines of a diplomat. In January 1984, Treholt was preparing for another day of work in Oslo. He walked through the familiar streets near his apartment, the winter air sharp, the sky dim. He was scheduled to meet a contact later that morning, a man associated with the Soviet embassy. It was not the first such meeting. Some were known to his colleagues, others were not. Shortly after leaving his home, and while carrying a briefcase, Treholt was approached and detained by security officers. It was a calm arrest, conducted without incident. The items he carried and the documents later found in his apartment became central pieces in the case that followed. In the months ahead, the investigation expanded. Evidence was cataloged. Meetings from previous years were examined. Interactions with both Soviet and Iraqi representatives were traced. In June 1985, after a lengthy trial, Treholt was convicted of espionage and sentenced to 20 years in prison. It remains one of the most significant espionage cases in Norwegian history. He would serve several years before being pardoned in 1992 due to health concerns and humanitarian considerations. He spent the later years of his life largely outside the public eye, living abroad, returning occasionally to Norway, and offering his own accounts of events, accounts that sometimes aligned with the record and sometimes differed. He died in 2023, age 79. Several moments in the case stand out, though each carries its own weight and context. The discovery of classified documents in Treholt's possession was a major turning point. These materials, connected to defense matters and foreign policy, were presented as evidence that information had been passed to foreign intelligence services. Photographs taken by surveillance teams showed meetings with Soviet officials. Some were held in public places, restaurants, hotels, streets, captured at a distance, their content unknown beyond what could be seen. Financial movements were examined as well. Transfers and unexplained income were documented and presented in court. None of these details, on their own, fully explained Treholt's intentions. Together, they formed the basis of the judgment against him. Over the years, a separate debate grew around aspects of the evidence, particularly concerning the authenticity and handling of certain materials. This debate never fully settled, leaving some observers uncertain and others convinced. But on the record, the conviction remained intact, unrevised by the courts. The physical objects that define the case are ordinary to look at. Folders of documents, notebooks, photographs, a briefcase, currency counted and sealed in envelopes. On a table, these items give no outward sign of significance. They are things that could belong to many people, in many professions. It is their context, where they were found, how they were used, and what they contained, that gave them meaning within the investigation. The documents included notes, analyses, and papers marked with varying degrees of classification. Some related to Norway's defense planning, others concerned political matters of the time. To this day, the full set of objects remains part of the legal archive. They sit in storage rooms, in carefully maintained boxes, their relevance now quiet, their sharpness softened by time. Many interpretations have surrounded Treholt's case. Some believe the evidence clearly demonstrated that he provided sensitive information to Soviet and Iraqi contacts. Others suggest that his actions may have been motivated by diplomacy rather than betrayal, that he operated in a self-defined space between official channels and personal initiative. Some argue that aspects of the investigation may have been influenced by political tension during the Cold War. Others point to claims made decades later that certain pieces of evidence may not have been handled in a fully reliable manner. These claims remain disputed. No definitive conclusion has been reached that alters the official record. In Treholt's own later writings and interviews, he acknowledged contact with foreign officials, but denied providing information he believed harmful to Norway. The distance between these positions has never been fully bridged. It is possible that some parts of the story will remain unresolved, not because they are hidden, but because memory, politics, and the passage of time intertwine in ways that resist clarity. Oslo continues its quiet rhythm today. The government buildings where Treholt once worked stand unchanged in their shape and color. The streets he walked carry the same pale light in winter, the same long shadows in summer along the harbor. The city still looks outward toward other countries, other diplomats, other negotiations. If one were to visit the places connected to his life, the apartment blocks, the ministry hallways, the corridors of the courthouse, there would be nothing to mark his presence. These spaces have absorbed the years, allowing new routines to form, new footsteps to replace the old ones. In this way, the landscape holds its memories quietly, without displaying them. Treholt's death in 2023 closed the final chapter of a long and complex life, a life shaped by diplomacy, controversy, and the shifting tides of Cold War tension. He spent his later years far from the intensity of the 1980s, living with the consequences of his conviction and the lingering debates around it. Now, with time creating a soft distance between past and present, the story rests in a quieter space, held partly by the historical record and partly by the uncertainty that has always surrounded it. There's no clear conclusion to draw, no firm lesson to offer, only the understanding that some lives remain marked by unresolved questions, even long after the noise has faded. Outside, the Nordic light moves gently across the city, touching the buildings where he once worked. The air carries a calm stillness, and the river flows quietly past the harbor. And in that stillness, the story of Arne Treholt settles into the soft folds of memory, unanswered, unhurried, and at rest.